The black bag. Of all the things that have ever happened to me in my life, this has got to be definitely the most extraordinary. I don't believe words can actually do justice in truly capturing this particular experience that happened to me. In the past, I've only shared this story with a few close friends who I thought were spiritually mature enough to receive it. Although now, all must know that with men, things are definitely impossible. But with God our Father, all things become possible. Matthew 19:26. It was a cold and windy January night. The temperature had fallen to about 19 degrees with a little snow accumulation. The weather report said the entire Chicago region was expecting several inches of snow throughout the night. So being unsure of what the roads might look like the next morning, I decided to make a quick dash to the supermarket and grab a few things just in case. As I was leaving, my wife at that time asked if I could take the trash to the dumpster on my way out. I said no problem and grabbed the trash along with my keys and my black bag that had my wallet in it. When I got outside, I sat the black bag on the back of the bumper of my truck so I would have a free hand to open the dumpster. From there, I'm not really sure if it was due to the cold weather or just plain forgetfulness, but after throwing the trash away, I quickly jumped in the truck and drove off. I totally forgot that I had left my black bag on the back of the bumper. The grocery store that I usually went to was about 3 miles from my house, with just a few turns here and there. Due to the weather, the normal 15-minute drive would actually take about 30 minutes this particular time, based on the weather. When I finally pulled into the store parking lot and parked my truck, that's when it hit me. I remember leaving the bag on the bumper of the truck. If you could have seen my face when I realized I had done that, I looked as if I had just seen a ghost. I was completely stunned. I just sat there for a moment, frozen. How could I have been so careless? Then, out of possible natural reaction, or maybe just plain insanity, I actually jumped out of the truck and rushed to the rear to see if the bag was still there. LOL, yeah, I know that's crazy. I guess I was hoping that the speed, the wind, and all the turns I made hadn't knocked the bag off the bumper. Yeah, right. I remember getting back in the truck after checking and just sitting there shaking my head as I thought about my bag. I could envision my bag laying somewhere in the open with all of my identity, money, credit cards, and everything. This was unbelievable. As I sat there, I started to assess the distance I had drove. The fact that it was night, and then to make matters worse, it was slightly snowing. The odds of me actually finding my black bag at night in a snowstorm would be nearly impossible. Even if I backtracked, the snow would have covered the bag by now, at least to some degree. Nevertheless, I thought it was worth a try. The great thing was that there wasn't a lot of traffic out, so it gave me an opportunity to drive real slow so that I was able to scan the opposite side of the street. Everything was now sort of white because the snow had accumulated somewhat. Nevertheless, I wasn't going to give up. As I drove along the street searching for the bag, the thought suddenly hit me that maybe the bag could have fell in the alley when I left my house. The bag wasn't too heavy, so it was a good possibility that maybe it never made it out of the alley. So in order to save some time, I took a shortcut and jumped on the expressway, and I started to get really excited because it made perfect sense that the bag would have fallen off the truck when I drove off. My confidence was now restored. Thankfully, it took no time to get back to the house. When I turned onto my street and I got to the alley, my eyes were opened wide. I could almost envision my bag lying there on the ground somewhere. I was too eager. Sadly, when I got to the garage and looked around on the ground, it didn't take long to kill my excitement. The bag was nowhere to be found. I even walked the entire length of the alley, but no bag. Once I realized the bag wasn't there, of course, I jumped back in the truck and began heading back in the direction I initially drove when I went to the store the first time. By now, it was starting to snow harder. Reality was setting in that maybe I needed to consider the weather and the amount of time that had now passed. I began to realize that there was a small chance of me finding my bag at this point. I was looking for a needle in a haystack. As a result, I made a tough call and turned around and headed back home. Talking about a broken spirit, I felt like the wind had been completely knocked out of me. What was supposed to be a warm and cozy night indoors turned into a cold and disappointing nightmare outside. When I got home, I just sat there in the truck for a few minutes thinking. I then decided to go in the house and tell my wife what had happened. When I told her, she was totally shocked. I told her I would get up early in the morning and go out once more to see if I could find it. I told her if I couldn't, I would cancel all of my credit cards immediately. My night was ruined. How could I have done something so stupid? I knew I was not going to rest at all that night. I needed to find my bag, and I needed to find it tonight. So, as you would guess, I went back out again. I looked around the garage and even walked the alley a second time, but no luck. Finally, I decided to do the one thing that always seemed to help me resolve my problems day by day. I decided to pray and meditate. I figured God our Father's eyes were much more better than my own. I had grown accustomed by now to talking with my Father about every single thing. Seriously. So this case right here was going to be no different. I sat there deep in prayerful meditation for about 10 minutes. The first 2 minutes of my meditation are always the prayerful portion. This is where I consciously come to the Father in thanksgiving in spite of any situation. I thank Him for all things being possible, because that's what I truly believe, that with our Father, all things are possible. In other words, this simply makes us available to our Father when we open ourselves to our Father. I often tell people that prayer is not just talking to the Father, but it's also listening to the Father. To me, prayer and meditation are like removing the dome of our skull and giving our Father access to our mind and our heart for the inflow of love, peace, strength, and wisdom. So as I sat there meditating quietly, expecting my Father to help me in some type of way, what happened next would be a spiritual game changer and transform my life forever. It would defy all laws of reasoning. It would question the very fiber of what we say is possible and impossible. It will become a scene right out of a movie. For I now recognize that life is so much bigger than any of us could ever imagine. Some things are true and very possible, whether you have the validation of others or not. Remember that. When we open ourselves to our Father, all things become possible, as mentioned in Mark 9:23. This was definitely one of those moments, to say the least. As I sat there with my eyes closed, focused, quiet, and open to my Father, from out of the darkness of my meditation, I suddenly saw a flash of light. I never opened my eyes. At first, I couldn't clarify what it was, because it came so quickly and then disappeared right back into the darkness of my meditation. As I sat there quietly, patiently waiting, within a few moments, I saw it again. There was another flash. This time, it was slightly clearer. I could actually make out some image, but I couldn't believe this. But once again, I never opened my eyes. And within a moment, I saw the flash again, but this time as if it completely slowed down long enough for me to see it. What I saw was the top of a hill and a McDonald's sign. Then it quickly faded back once more. Yes, of course my brow was raised. And yes, this was strange. This totally caught me off guard, as everything else that I'd experienced with my Father. I wasn't expecting this to happen, to say the least. What I saw was the image of a hill, and I saw this McDonald's sign. Oddly enough, for some reason, I knew exactly where this location was. I can't explain it, but somehow I just knew this was where my bag was located. This was definitely a crazy moment, to say the least. If this was true, that I was actually being shown where my bag was, my life was about to seriously change forever. Immediately, I opened my eyes and I jumped out of my truck. I was so frantic I almost fell. My heart was racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened. What was even more crazy was the fact that I was about to go in the house and tell my wife all of this. I did feel a little crazy, believing that I actually knew where my bag was located. 45 minutes had passed at this point, and the snow had become even heavier. But for some reason, that did not discourage me. There was an unexplainable certainty about this moment. Although, what kept going through my mind was, how do I tell my wife that I know where my bag is located? To be honest, this didn't feel like a guess. I clearly saw the image while I was in prayer and meditation, so I was hopeful my bag was somewhere in that area. Yeah, this was a lot for me to take in, so I could only imagine what you're thinking as you're listening to all of this, and what she was going to think. I suddenly burst into the house, all excited. I said to my wife, "You're not going to believe what just happened." She said, "What?" I said, "I believe I know where my bag's located." And with a very strange look upon her face, she then replied, "What do you mean you know where your bag is located?" I said, "I saw the location while I was in meditation, and I'm headed there now." She was completely speechless. She just sort of looked at me as if the bag wasn't the only thing I had lost, which was expected. Laugh out loud. Nevertheless, I didn't even give her time to respond. I told her, "I'll be back. I'm going to get my bag. You'll see. I promise you, you'll see." She just stood there looking, trying to process what was going on. The look on her face clearly read, "Are you crazy?" Nonetheless, I rushed out the door. My heart was racing. My adrenaline was pumping. I was both scared and excited. I was praying that I wasn't losing my mind. In other words, please, Father, don't let me be going crazy in this moment. But I guess we'll have to see.